Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Thoughts of the Young Icon with me, Sam. Today, I want to make a battle cry, a rally cry to my fellow Malawians. In this video and in the next video, I'm going to talk about how we need to unite, how we need to stop accepting mediocrity, how we need to rise above the ashes and make our country a better place, not just for ourselves, but for our kids. I hope you enjoy the video. So today I want to share with you a thought that I've had. It's not a complete thought, but it's a thought that has been running through my mind lately. It wasn't too long ago. My wife and I were having a chat. We're sort of planning our next trip to the US. In fact, no, my wife had just gotten back from the US, and we were having a discussion as to the differences between life here and life there. Now, we're not talking in regards to, living conditions or anything in particular. We were just sort of, tackling the idea or trying to grasp the idea as to why in Malawi it appears as though there's so many people who are doing poorly, who are not doing well financially, whereas in the US or the few places that she had been to on this last trip, it was richly abundantly clear that people there are mostly doing well, with some few people not doing very well financially, that is. Now, this is something which made me sort of sleepless at night. I lingered upon it for a very long time. And in my brain, I came up with a phrase that I have coined, lack in the midst of plenty, because I feel like that is the situation in which Malawi finds itself in. Malawi is a richly blessed country in regards to pretty much every resource. You talk of natural resources like gold, you talk of an abundance of um, precious stones. We have rubies, we have sapphire, and these are very high value stones. And, we have a very fertile land, we have a lake that spans a third of our country, and we have a young population ready, able, and willing to work. Yet somehow we remain poor. And we remain poor not just with regards to our current condition, but we remain poor in that we do not look like we're going to move from our current states. And it made me wonder, man, how on earth are we in a situation where everything that is required to advance is there? However, we somehow choose or we somehow find ourselves in a situation where nothing is changing. My first thought, and the first thought that I guess anyone would come up to, is the problem is our leaders. And yes, I want to blame our leaders, but I think that's a scapegoat. When we look at our leaders, what we realize is our leaders are us. It's not as though we imported our leaders. It's not as though our leaders were born somewhere else. They came here just to lead us, and they're running our country down because they don't care about our country. No, that's not the case. I wish it was the case. In fact, that sounds a little bit like colonization. But when we look at our colonial masters, they enslaved the masses, but yet somehow they still carried out developmental works, which we see until today. Um, Once we were no longer under our colony, because we were a British colony, it appears as though things have gone from bad to worse. And so it's easy to blame our leaders. It's easy to say our leaders need to do better. But what I've realized is our leaders are us. Our leaders are a reflection of who we are. As a nation, when we say our leaders are corrupt, what we're saying is we're a corrupt people. When we say that our leaders are stealing or our leaders are misleading or misusing resources, what you realize is we as a people, we steal, we are corrupt, we misuse resources. And if you're perfectly honest and you look at it even at a household level, what you're going to realize is most households, they reflect what our leaders show. So our leaders are not the reason why we lack despite having everything that we need not to lack. Our leaders are simply a reflection of us. But then that takes us into a deeper question of how did we then take up this mindset or this identity whereby we're destructive? Now, again, it becomes easy to go back and blame our colonial masters, to blame those who enslaved us, and say, hey, you guys didn't teach us how to manage our resources, or you guys didn't teach us how to live by ourselves. But again, that argument stopped working for me in my head when we came to the information age. The moment information became widespread for everyone, and this has been around for about 20 years, that excuse is no longer applicable. The same information that is accessible to the leaders and the people abroad is the same information that we have access to here. When we talk of our leaders, a lot of our leaders are foreign trained. A lot of them have PhDs and master's degrees, which they attained in the Americas, in Europe, in Britain. And so that's not an excuse. Why is it that despite getting all this information, despite having all the resources that we require, somehow we remain in this situation of poverty? I then examined a statement that my dad made about a certain professor. I'm not going to mention his name, but my this man had made such he had done something so audacious. My father referred to him as an educated fool, and I lingered upon his words, and I realized that I think that's what ends up happening to a lot of our leaders, to a lot of the people who end up taking control of our country. They're educated fools. And what do educated fools do? Educated fools act foolishly. Now, the unfortunate thing is when you meet someone who's educated, your expectation is for them to act in a way that you would think is honorable, but they act foolishly. And how am I defining foolishly in this instance? Well, foolishness is firstly being self seeking, not regarding others, not regarding country, not unifying, actively dividing, actively doing whatever it takes, whatever the means is to stay in power, irrespective of oppressing other people, oppressing the desires and wishes of other people. And that's where we found ourselves as a country. Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend I have all the answers. I do not. I am not. I am wise enough to know my limitations. I am wise enough to know that I am seeing the problems, but I also understand the people who are leading us failing to address them because they can also clearly see them, but they don't have the solution. However, I do have some ideas. I do have a place where I believe we would need to start. I think the one thing that has been neglected for a very long time, and unfortunately, our political arena has further worsened this, is the fact that Malawi does not have a national identity. You know, when you don't have a national identity, when you don't have something that you all stand for as a people, then you become divided. And where there is division, no development can take place. You know, when we look at our Western counterparts, when you look at their leaders, you know, I pay particular attention and I notice some of the things that are going on in the world and how some of the things that have gone on in the world and how they've impacted the way people think. Sometimes it can be something terrible. You know, we talk of for argument's sake, a world war or something, and that terrible event ends up unifying the people, bringing them together, giving them a common vision, giving them something to stand for, giving them a national identity. But it doesn't just happen by chance. It happens through the leadership. The leadership takes an active role in noticing that people are divided, and because they're divided, we need to bring them together. And in Malawi, that's something that we just haven't seen. We haven't seen a leader who has come in and brought the people together. And to me, that's very concerning. We need to get to a point where we have an identity. We have something which we can say Malawi and stand for. You know, when we say Malawi is the warm heart of Africa, yes, it's true. Malawi truly is the warm heart of Africa. You meet a lot of friendly people, but those friendly people are only friendly, or let me not say only, they are mostly friendly to people who are from elsewhere. When you listen and you listen intently and you observe intently, you start to realize that the warm heart of Africa is probably not the correct term to describe Malawians, especially in the way that they treat other Malawians, especially another Malawian who is not of the same tribe as them. You know, there's jealousy, there's envy. Man, it's like I'm reciting our national anthem. The things that we shouldn't have are the things that we have somehow adopted. The things that are uniting us are the things that divide. You know, you talk of envy, you talk of selfishness, you talk of thinking only for today and not having concern for tomorrow. You know, my business partner and I, we had a conversation the other day, and he was telling me because we were debating something, and basically what I was trying to say was I thought that someone had been bribed in order to kill themselves, and the bribe was that their family would be taken care of. And my business partner Thomas, he strongly refuted, and his argument was no Malawian man is going to allow to die, even if it is at the expense of their family. Now, his words, I don't know how true that is, but I would back those words. I am of the view that we have gotten to the point where even fathers in Malawi are not willing to die for their sons. We have gotten to the point where our mindset is so self centered, so self serving, that even wives or even mothers don't care for their children in a situation where they have to choose between money and their children. And this is unfortunate. You know, again, like my thinking is there's so much here. Malawi has so much potential, yet we can never realize this potential when everyone is thinking every man for themselves. You see, when one person is trying to carry out an operation or they're trying to do something, they're less productive compared to when a lot of people come together and they decide to venture on something, the productivity increases greatly. I think the economic term is economies of scale. Like it's something which has been it's something which we know. It's something which our economists know. You know, I'm not really one to talk politics, but man, I fault the government for these fertilizer subsidies. And the irony of it is that I am a beneficiary of that. But fertilizer subsidies to me have never made sense. I remember in the first budget that they were put in under this new government, they put aside, it must have been 200, $300 million. And they were giving a bag, two bags of fertilizer to who they claimed were the neediest of farmers. I mean, my argument was okay, if these guys were so poor, how did they survive up until now? Because I strongly believe that even in the years before, these guys still had fertilizer. Now, after pumping, you know, is it 200, $300 million, what you'd expect to see is that there's going to be a drastic change in productivity. And yet, no, that's not what happened. They pumped in 200, $300 million, and I think the increase in yield was less than 10%. And you cannot justify to me 200, $300 million going into a subsidy program, and yet the yield percentage increase is less than 10%. If that same 200, $300 million had gone into commercialized farming, I guarantee you the increase in yield would be at least 2, 3 times greater. I'm talking 200, 300%. But again, it boils down to the mindset that we have here, the mindset of I'm going to do this thing, I'm not going to involve someone else. So subsistence farming becomes more of something that people want to do as opposed to commercialized farming. Now, for me, that's something which it bothers me. And again, it goes down to the lack of national identity. The moment we can't unify in anything as a nation, then we're going to remain in lack. I feel like I'm ranting, but I'm not ranting. I'm a concerned citizen. I'm a concerned citizen who deeply loves this country. And I feel as though if no one if no one talks about it, if no one starts to realize that something is wrong, if no one tries to unify us, then we will forever remain divided. And if we forever remain divided, then we will forever remain in poverty. Now, look, it's easy for me. I live in Planta. I live in the city. I work a corporate job, or rather, I run a company, and so it's easy for me to sit here and be like, hey, Sam I make enough money. I can take care of my family, and that's fine. But it's not. It's not fine. It's not fine that I can take care of my family and yet someone else can't take care of their family. And the problem is that the right people are not coming together to give us the solutions. I watch parliamentary debates and I think to myself, man, there's a bunch of bollocks. Like, why are they debating on issues that are not going to solve the problems at hand? I love this nation. And the one thing that I'm asking from this video, even though it seems like I'm angry and I'm not angry, the one thing that I desire most is for us to come together, for us to take advantage of the information and the resources and the brains of, there's Pareto's law. It talks about how 80% of the work is done by 20% of the most productive people. In Malawi, we need to get to a point where we we take the people who are actually productive and we put them in positions where they can be productive for the benefit of the 80%. Malawi has a population of it claims 20 million. I think it's 30, but we'll take the 20. But if in that 20 million, 20% of those people were just given the license, the ability, they were enabled and empowered to help us, that it means that they will become more productive, which means that the rest of the economy is going to benefit. There's this argument that I saw in some of the debates in the US and in the Western world where it was talking about how I think it was Donald Trump was trying to push for tax breaks for corporations, and the other side is trying to push for tax breaks for the little man, so social welfare programs and the like. And I am all for that. Like, I believe in a balance, but the truth of the matter is, in a nation like Malawi, what we need to do is we need to encourage those who are actually already being productive to be even more productive. And by being even more productive, then they'll lift up the ones who are currently unproductive. But if we take our bet, if we take our resources and we give it to the people who at the moment are not even being productive, I think we're taking a gamble in a situation which is improbable to get the result that we want. It's like we're taking resources and saying, this guy who I know can definitely deliver on what he says is going to deliver, I'm not going to give him the resources. But this guy who I'm not too sure about, I'm going to give him all the resources and I'm going to hope that he delivers. That can't work. Now, we'll just call this part one because I don't want to ramble on for too long. But basically, I want you, especially my Malawian viewers, to just have a think about it. Think about the fact that we have all these resources. Think about the fact that we have a lake and yet we still wait for rainy season for us to produce our stable crop, maize, for us to produce our cash crops. We have the lake and we have a river that literally runs from the top of the country all the way to the bottom. So basically, throughout, then it doesn't matter whether you're in the northern region, central region, southern region, you have access to water, and yet somehow we still wait for the seasons. And when it doesn't rain very well that year, there's hunger. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the fact that we have gold, the fact that we have sapphire, the fact that we have rubies, the fact that we have all these precious metals, and yet you're still poor. I want you to think about the fact that everyone in Malawi is just thinking about themselves. I want you to think about the fact that our leaders are just thinking about themselves. We vote them into power on promises that they make, but they don't deliver. And yet we don't hold them accountable. And then I want you to ask yourself a question. If you were in the position that they're in, would you act differently? And I want you to be honest with yourself. And if the answer is no, I wouldn't act differently, I'm not going to hold that against you. In fact, I expect that most of you, that's going to be your answer. But if your answer is yes, I would act differently, then I want you to take an active role in helping this nation get to where it needs to be. Because if you would act differently, then it's probably time for you to start acting differently now and take this nation by the scruff of the neck, whatever industry you're in, become vocal. If you're in politics, stand up in parliament, stand up for the things that people actually want done, stand up for unity, stand up for the fact that people who need help need to be helped by people who can help them. Again, part one. If you've watched this far, I'd like you to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to tell a friend about Thoughts of the Young Icon. Thank you very much.